So why do we care about all this stuff with directories and folders and paths and projects? Why is this important to us? Well, it's because we are eventually going to have to load data sets into R. And we're going to have to store the raw version of those data sets somewhere. Finding the location of that data can be a bit of a headache. So there's a function called read.csv. We'll talk a little more about this in a moment, but right now let's just focus on this common function, and that is a way to read in data. And this function can have as its first argument either a URL or a path. You have to tell it where the data lives, and that might be on the internet somewhere, or that might be somewhere on your local computer with a path of folders leading to that file. What's nice about the URL is that it works for everyone. So for example, here's a way that you could load this week's lab dataset. This is a URL. I have stored the data on my personal Dropbox, and I have shared that link with everybody. And so what's nice about that is that that line of code is going to run on your computer, on my computer, on any computer with an internet connection. Now the downside here is that this requires me to be hosting that data somewhere. If I ever moved that data off of my Dropbox, suddenly all of your code would break. So there's a trade-off here. It is really nice to have data online. That is maybe the best way to share it. But it's kind of temporary. It requires that that data always lives at the same link. It's a little dangerous. Now what I could also do is I could use the entire path. So for me, this data set lives in a data folder within the folder for this course, within my teaching and my Dropbox and myself. But of course, like we talked about before, this is only going to work on my computer. If you try to run that line of code, nothing is going to happen. You are not K. Bodwin of the user. If you are, please reach out to me. Maybe we're related. That'd be cool. But you aren't me, and you don't necessarily have the same sequence of folders where that data set is stored. So the whole path will work for me, but it's not very good for sharing your code in a way that other people can use. So you say, okay, well, there is a home base, there is a working directory. If R knows where the home base is, then maybe I don't need the whole path. And that's true. I could just say, let me read this file, hiphop.csv. And if this file is in the working directory, great. R will know to look in home base, it will find it, it will read it in, everybody's happy. Of course, it's not in home base in this case, it's in a subfolder called data, much like the one I just asked you to create. So you could say, well, I'm fancy, I know computers, I know how to do relative paths. I know that there's this trick where if I put the dot says home base, and then we say from home base, let me go in the data folder where I can find hiphop.csv. And this is a nice solution, this is how I used to do it. This will work if indeed your folder structure is home base is in the right place, and hiphop is in a subfolder called data. Of course, this could get you into trouble, because as you rearrange your folders, then this relative path is going to change. So here's my new favorite solution. This is a fairly new package from the Tidyverse people. I really love this package called here. You can go ahead and install it now if you want. What this package does is it determines the location that is here, which usually means the directory of the closest R project, wherever the nearest flag that's been planted is. And so, for example, in this file right now, the file for these slides, if I say, hey, here package, what directory do you think is here right now? It says to me, well, I think that directory is all the way up to the stat331 online folder. That's the folder where my R project flag is planted. And here knows that. Here says, look, I found a file matching the R project type. So why is this cool? Well, remember that we had this idea of the working directory. Where does this document that I'm looking at right now live? Well, it lives in that home base of stat331, but then in another subfolder for this week, and in another subfolder for this particular lesson. And so this is a bit of a pain, because I'm trying to read data into this file, then I have to go backwards out of those two subfolders to home base, and then forwards from home base into my data folder. So if I want to use that relative path trick I was showing you earlier, what I have to do is these somewhat annoying dots that say back out one level, back out another level, now go forwards into the data folder, and now here's hiphop.csv. Again, this will work But again, this is something that if you ever rearrange your files at all, it's a problem. If I rearrange this file right here, but don't move the data at all, now I'm backing out differently. This path is relative to where my current file exists. So it's not great. So what the here package does is says, let's do everything relative to what I've decided is home base. So instead of referencing the data relative to this file where I'm writing my code, these slides, let's reference it relative to where the project lives. No matter what I'm working on, home base is my project. And so if I say, even within this file, let's go here in the subfolder data and find hip hop, it knows that here is home base, where I have a subfolder of data and a file named hip hop. It's very, very handy. And so it's going to adapt to each person's path. If I want to put a line of code in my file that reads some data in, and I will know that it will work for everyone that I share my project folder with, then I can just use here to create that path. This function returns a string which contains information about a path. And then that's what I'm putting in as my argument to read.csv. And so when I use this on my computer, this function is going to give back this path that is in the kbodwin section of this computer. And when you use it on your computer, then this here function is going to give back whatever path leads to home base on your computer. It's really handy, the most reproducible way I know to share data. I want to really encourage you to get in the habit of using this package.